Some of the worst pre-med advice lives on TikTok. Not only are they inaccurate, they're more likely to keep you from ever earning a medical school acceptance. Let's start with TikTok number one. Yeah, so this does get better. And I think this is a very common experience for a lot of pre-meds. It's that they have to balance the rest of their life with their goals professionally. I find that if you don't get ahead of this, it becomes a really bad problem for a very long time. And by get ahead of it, I mean that there has to come some point in your life where you decide that you are more than a pre-med, more than a medical student, more than a resident, more than a doctor. And the way that you kind of prove that to yourself is that on your weekly calendar, you commit to things outside of those identities and you do it first. For example, if you ever ran into me on the street, I would say that I'm a partner, I'm a son, I'm a basketball player, and it's reflected in my calendar. I put my weekly date night with my partner first every single week. I put my exercise and my sleep second every single week. I put things that I need for my mental health, a session with a therapist or a walk in the park. Those things are important before I put on extra shifts at the hospital or stuff that I need to do for the business. And to me, that tells me that before I am a startup founder, before I am a anesthesiology resident at Mount Sinai, I prioritize the rest of my life. And that allows me to, when I am spending time with them, when I am working out at the gym, I don't feel guilty because I've decided that those things are important to me. And the rest of my life, the professional stuff, it trickles in and fills in, and I have more than enough time to do everything I need to. You may find that when you make your calendar, you'll realize, oh, I can no longer go to that random Tuesday board night with friends that maybe I didn't prioritize or like that much anyway. Or I may have to stop scrolling 4 hours a day and take back some of that time so I can go to the gym or play basketball or spend time with my family. And I would argue that's a really nice reality to confront early, that you have enough time to do everything that is important to you, but you don't have enough time to do everything that's important to you and all the things that aren't important to you. I think this is a great TikTok. I think this is a struggle that we all share. And that has been my approach in getting ahead of some of those really heavy emotions. I hope you start questioning the typical pre-med advice that's all around us. Is this true? Is this helpful? Is this true and helpful for me? And if this video is helpful, click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of our new videos. All right, great TikTok. Let's move on to number two. Avoid majoring in bio. Describe MA Advantage. Don't be scared to gap year. Stop relying on cold emails and treat interview prep like MBA prep, and your in-state school is your best option. Okay, let's go from the top. So I think that 6 pre-med hacks is kind of a dangerous phrase already because it assumes that if you follow any one of these hacks, that you're going to get into medical school. Medical school is a complicated living organism, and I don't want to ever use words like hacks to kind of demean how complicated the entire system is. Yeah, some things may help, but the overall perspective I want to share is that you can't hack your way and you can't accidentally get into medical school. You're going to have to do it intentionally and purposefully. There's a lot of advice I don't actually agree with in this. Number one is avoid majoring in bio. And this creator makes the argument that bio is oversaturated and instead asks you to choose a major you're genuinely passionate about. My fear for this piece of advice is that you will go ahead and choose the fancy major. You will choose the neuroscience or the human biology and society because it is different. You will go ahead and major in economics because there's not a lot of economics or math majors applying to medical school. I agree with her that you should choose a major you're genuinely passionate about, even if it is a difficult major. I, for example, majored in neuroscience at UCLA, and I earned great grades in a traditionally hard major because I really enjoyed the subject matter. In fact, I actually tried to switch to psychobiology, and I took a psychobiology course, and I did really poorly, even though that was supposed to be an easier class. I just didn't find any of it interesting, and so I couldn't bother myself to study and prepare for the exams. And so you'll have to be honest with yourself on that front. With that being said, don't choose a unique major if you're not interested in a unique major. If you want to do bio just because that's the major you're most genuinely passionate about, then do bio. I think the overarching North Star here should be choose the major that you're most interested in, even if it means it will be slightly more difficult. If you're interested truly in things outside of biology, then go ahead and choose those majors too, not because they are different, but because you are interested in it. Her second piece of advice is to be a scribe in MA. And this is where I have a lot of commentary on. I think being especially a scribe in today's world is going to be a pretty dangerous spot. Yeah, you get paid. Yes, you get clinical experience, but the quality of clinical experience varies, right? It's not whether you got clinical experience, yes or no. It's not a binary, and it's certainly not a checkbox. It's how quality, how well, how informative was your clinical experience. And when you're a scribe, often what I find is that they get so intertwined with all the physical exam findings and the medical terminology and all the fancy words like tachyarrhythmia and SVT, and they start using all these words in personal statements and working activities and secondaries and interviews. And it's the idea that if I know medicine now as a pre-med, if I know medicine, or at least these big words, then that means I am prepared for medical school. But that's the wrong interpretation. In fact, most medical schools do not want you to know any medicine. That's the point of teaching it to you in medical school. They're looking for other traits, the ability to communicate, the ability to become a team player, the ability to understand different cultures and appreciate the role of medicine and the role of socioeconomic status on healing and health. I personally find scribes to be one of the worst clinical experiences just because all you're really doing is making sure that you're focusing on the conversation so that you write every keyword down, but you're not actually understanding the dynamic that's in front of you. In fact, I find that when I was shadowing, I better understood the physician-patient relationship because I didn't have a job. I could just sit there, observe the interaction, and get an understanding of what it was like to be sick and what it was like to be a doctor caring for sick people. And worst of all, I think scribes are going to be non-existent very soon with technology being able to listen, transcribe much better than a human scribe would ever be able to. Now, being an MA is different. I think being an MA has a very active role in the patient care relationship. Now, if you're scribing, whatever your title is, but if you are speaking to patients, rooming them, working through insurance, working with the healthcare team to prepare the injections, when you're speaking and working within that environment, that is very different. Here's where I really do agree with the creator. You need these real patient stories. You don't really need any medical decision making, but you do need to understand healthcare team dynamics. Certainly don't need to know any medical terminology, and it would be helpful to understand insurance and billing realities. One of my most, I think, memorable patient stories is when I worked at a underserved clinic that served Vietnamese immigrants, mostly older Vietnamese folks. And most of my job was opening up Google Maps, or back then it was MapQuest, to tell and show these elderly 70-year-old Vietnamese grandmas how to get to their gastroenterologist for their colonoscopy. I literally pulled up a map, told them what bus line to take, told them what stop to get off at. And that was very difficult for someone who didn't speak any English, who was much older and may not have had like coins or dollars or understood how to interact with the terrible Los Angeles public transit system. That helped me understand how difficult it is for patients to get the care that they needed. Those are the types of stories that you're trying to get to. And I personally don't think that as a scribe, you'll get there. Maybe as an MA, you will, but I want you to see clinical experiences. The goal for it is to develop an understanding of what it's like to be a patient, what it's like to be a provider, and you won't get that with all this scribe medical terminology, medical decision-making stuff. All right, next is don't be scared to take a gap year. I mean, I think this is totally appropriate. I find that when I was in undergrad, my goal was to never take a gap year, and I created my plan aggressively so that I could do that. If at any point along the way I felt like there were signs that I couldn't handle the full course load, I couldn't handle the extracurriculars, couldn't handle the research in the morning, couldn't handle giving up my winter breaks or my summer breaks for MCAT prep or whatever it was, then I had a backup plan that was a gap year. I encourage you to do that too. I think you guys are much more capable than you think. And if you If the only barrier to taking a gap year is that you feel like you might not be able to handle it, try to handle it first. And then when the world when reality gives you evidence that you can't handle it, then you can go to a backup plan. Regardless, I think the larger point is have a plan, be aggressive because you're capable if that's what you really want, and then have a backup plan. If reality tells you that you need to spend more time to take care of your grades, you need to spend more time to build up your extracurricular profile. All right, I think I'll skip these two and go to number 6, which is your in-state school is your best option. This is, I think, a little bit controversial. In my world, being from California, my family being in Southern California, my in-state school, UCLA, was my best option. It is the Harvard, Hopkins, Stanford of Southern California. I don't think there's any other private institution down there that would be comparable. That being said, if I didn't live in Southern California, what are the benefits of going to an in-state school versus a big private? So she makes the argument that it's probably your smartest choice financially and practically. Well, maybe, but NYU, now that I'm in New York, NYU, that is a private school, and they have given full free tuition to those who have gotten in. And you only get into NYU by being extremely competitive. So certainly that's not true in every case. In-state public schools offer more generous aid. Again, it depends. Like if you are and have worked your ass off for the last 3 or 4 years to develop a very competitive application, the merit-based scholarships that USC offers, that Cornell offers, that Vanderbilt and NYU offers, those can completely erase all of your medical school debt. Now, she writes that in-state schools, you graduate with less debt, have built-in connections to local residency programs, and no one cares where you went to med school once you're a practicing physician. Patients don't ask if their doctor went to an Ivy League. They care if you're competent and caring. Yeah, I think that's largely true, but I will say that most of my career opportunities have come from being associated with these really strong brand name schools. UCLA opened all the doors to any residency in the country. Being at Mount Sinai now, being one of the teaching chief residents now, that's going to open a lot more jobs for me. If I ever wanted to go to fellowship, if I wanted to take a job at an academic institution, my approach has always been take all the advantages you can. And there are clear advantages at Hopkins and Harvard and Stanford and UCSF and UCLA and Sinai and NYU. But also, yeah, you have to balance being practical. I think the assumption here is if you go to a Harvard, then you trade being $300,000 in debt. But I believe that if you're going to work hard for the last 3 or 4 years, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can go to Harvard debt free. You can go to Johns Hopkins and have every professional career option available to you, only to realize, oh, I'm going to go and be a community practicing anesthesiologist. I don't need that anymore. That being said, the training at Johns Hopkins is probably better. You get sicker patients. You have a robust infrastructure. You probably have some of the best educators on the face of this planet, and that makes you a better physician overall. So I'm always very hesitant to recommend blankly your in-state school option being the best option. I think there are many, many examples, especially for the most competitive students in the country, where they get to choose where they go. And so your goal should be to open every door to be the most competitive applicant you can, to be the best version of yourself you can be, so that you have choice. Otherwise, let's move on to TikTok number 3.
Bro, we're officially pre-med. Just imagine it, man. Dr. Mac.
Old UCLA campus, beautiful as ever.
It's got a good ring to it. Dude, I can't wait to graduate. All right, which organ pumps blood through the body? Yes, you in the front.
Yeah, that
would be the heart. That is correct!
Still got it.
Bro, we're going to med school! Sorry, what was that? Can you repeat that? Oh, we said this major super easy, and we're easily going to become doctors and be millionaires.
We're going to be so much better than a professor.
Oh, right. Let's move on to organic chemistry, shall we?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, when you haven't done organic chemistry, this looks very alien. Oh, gosh. Like the lighting. Oh. This is one of the classic things you'll learn in biochemistry preparation for your MCAT exams. So, yeah, these are real examples. And I think the end of it is him transferring majors here because he feels like he can't handle it.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Perfect. That was the final in my major as well. But I think the larger point is well taken. I personally don't believe that organic chemistry was any harder than biology. In fact, I think the biology series at UCLA is quite difficult. I think physics is probably harder than that for me. And then organic chemistry, interestingly, was probably the easiest along with general chemistry. It just looks foreign. And I think it's very common for us to scroll and ingest this type of content. And, there's humor, but humor is always based on a little bit of truth. And from my perspective, the truth here is that if you see something foreign, you get kind of scared of it and you shut yourself down. You don't believe that you can handle it. But if you've completed, I don't know, pre-calculus or calculus or trigonometry by now, you'll remember that when you started looking at those things, you're like, what in the world is this squiggly integral or this derivative? But they're all just kind of functions of algebra and pre-algebra. You have to learn every single individual step. And when you get to organic chemistry, all those big squigglies and rings and lines, they all go back to core fundamental basic building blocks. The point I'm trying to really make here is not to teach you organic chemistry, but it's to tell you that you can do it. You have learned so many fundamental blocks from learning how to enunciate words like cat and dog, to build sentences and build paragraphs and write essays. You can do the exact same thing with something that looks foreign. Don't be afraid of it. The world needs better doctors, and I always think it's a shame that people get weeded out because they don't believe they can understand or have the ability to learn an organic chemistry or a biochemistry series like that. You do have the ability to do that. People just put up these very scary diagrams just to kind of scare you off. But if I did the same with algebra or geometry, you'd be equally scared off. But you look at that now and you scoff. Imagine a diagram of every single word that you know. It's got to be in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands, and it would look scary to a second grader. But now you're in college and you know every single one of those words and each of their definitions and how to use the sentences and how to spell all of them. You can do it. Let's move to TikTok number 4. Just again, beautiful UCLA campus. Look at the light. Look at these tall, nice little buildings. Interestingly, these buildings are asymmetric. So you'll see that this has 3 windows, this has 2, this is 3, this is 2. And there's apparently like 30 some differences between the two. And people have only found 36 or something like that. There's like the classic UCLA tour guide story. Okay. So Tara's iPhone screen time is about 9 hours a day. It looks like on the weekends, much less. Maybe she's, spending time with her friends and family on the weekends. And then during the work week or study week, she's spending a lot more time. Social is about 4 hours. Oh, this is also interesting when she spends the time. Probably sleeping through the night here, but I guess a lot of TikTok before bed or something. And then really during the workday, not much. Yeah, entertainment, I guess, is different from social. I don't know if that's an iMessage or something like that. Rich nigga shit, baby, where you wanna be at? Nothing but money on my mind, I'm a cash addict. Young nigga lit, I remember when they laughed at me. I mean, this is screen time again with a daily average of 1 hour and 40. This time it's much less during the day, almost less than 30 minutes during most of these days. And then nighttime, just a lot more. Okay, so look, I think there's some seasons where you spend a lot of time on your phone. 85 cents in your bank account. That's pretty funny. Okay. So, I mean, look, I think this is highly accurate. There's some seasons where you need to put pedal to the metal and you barely touch your phone. MCAT season, final season, midterm season. And there are many other times in your life where it's totally appropriate to spend 8, 9, 10 hours on the phone if that's how you find joy. I mean, I personally spend probably 3-4 hours in a basketball court playing basketball on a Wednesday or Friday, and that's just as, you could argue, just as a waste of time as scrolling TikTok for a long time. But I really like these posts because it just makes success relatable. People think that medical students have made this unrelenting sacrifice, or in order to become a doctor, you have to stop being a normal human being. This is normal human being stuff. 85 cents in the bank account, going to McDonald's, going to have a 9-hour screen time to keep up with TikTok and the memes. This is all normal stuff. And when it's time to get to work, it's time to get to work. 1 hour and 40 minutes per day is super impressive. On Sunday, less than an hour. Friday, Saturday, barely an hour. So there are seasons of life where you can turn it on if you need to. I really appreciate this. Thanks for sharing. Let's move on to the next TikTok.
4.11 GPA at Cornell University as an undergrad and regret it. Here's why. Background, Cornell used the A+ system, which gave a 4.3
Like
instead of a 4.0 weight for any grade that was 97% or higher. I got a few A+, but mostly A's. But I was
I also feel like he's like staring deeply into my soul.
a bit devious. You see, my school had an official document that showed the average grade by class. So I only picked the ones with the highest average grade for any class that wasn't for my sociology major or pre-med requirements.
Okay, I mean, that's not crazy. If, again, like we talked about majors earlier, you should choose the major you're passionate about, but also you should choose the classes that you're passionate about. And inevitably, you're going to have to take classes you're not passionate about. At that point, it makes a lot of sense to just choose the ones that have the highest grades or takes the least amount of time to study so you can just get the job done and get it done well.
Literally just to inflate my GPA, and it worked. But sadly, because of that, I never really enjoyed my learning experience at college. I didn't care about the easy classes I took and was studying nonstop for my required ones. I feel like college is a unique experience and I just wasted it trying to grades max. I wish I took more interesting classes like the history of rock and roll or astronomy 101. Instead, I
He's in a luggage.
avoided any class that was even remotely hard to protect my GPA. And in the end, yeah, I became a doctor, but it wasn't even worth it. Medical schools converted the 4.3 for an A+ to a 4.0 to make it comparable to other colleges. The 4.11 didn't even affect anything. If you're in high school or college, please take classes for learning, not just achieving like I did. So I got a 4.
I totally agree with this. This is a great take. I mean, ultimately, you're going to have to take required classes. So if we do it, break it down like that, you're going to have to take some required classes, and then a portion of them will be ones that you really enjoy. A portion of them will be ones that you don't enjoy. So for the ones that you don't enjoy but are required, just choose the ones that you can get the highest grades on. For the ones that are required and you enjoy, congratulations, you're in a really good place anyway. Now, there's going to be a lot of classes that are not required. So if you're taking not required classes, yeah, you should absolutely choose classes that you absolutely enjoy, because why would you take a not required class that you don't enjoy? At that point, don't take the class, right? So there were many classes at UCLA that I really wanted to take that had real opportunity of threatening my GPA. One was PIC 10A or something like this, which is programs in computing. It was like an intro computer science class because I was interested in learning how to code. I got destroyed by that class, and then ultimately dropped it because it was not required. But I'm glad that I took it because it at least gave me an introduction to that world, and I appreciated learning a different kind of skill set than was common for pre-med majors. Another one that I took was like a class on coaching that I really enjoyed as part of the sociology class. And so college is a time to explore different interests. With that being said, think about the opportunity cost, right? If you're truly passionate about a class, then I would argue that it's worth spending the, 5 hours a week to go to class and study for the class and do well in the class. But if you're kind of like on the fence, then don't take it. You can use all that time for things that you actually do care about, like going to the gym or speaking to your mom on the phone on the weekends or visiting your family a little bit more often, or just hanging out and enjoying the college experience. But if you ever in that opportunity space where there are classes that are required and you're not sure if whether you should choose the one that has a little bit harder with a little bit worse grades or a little bit easier with better grades, but you don't like that class as much, choose one that's harder. You're going to do well just by the very nature of you enjoying the class. Great take. Great creative environments, backdrop, luggage, something. Great. Let's move on to the next TikTok. Don't procrastinate. All right. This is great. I think the points that I want to make is that a lot of people assume that if you study more hours, that you should be doing better than other people. But I found that that's rarely the case. A very common thing is like, oh my gosh, I studied all night for this exam. And yet, ironically, they don't do as well as the other people who slept through the entire night. And obviously, we know the mechanisms as to why that's the case. Now, you probably studied all night overnight because you weren't prepared in the last 10 weeks. And so you're trying to cram it all. And on top of that, you didn't get any sleep, which meant that you didn't consolidate any of the information, which meant that you didn't actually learn anything. Remember the goal. I mean, if your goal is to get an A, the goal is then to answer as many questions as correctly as possible. And the way to do that is to actually learn the material. And so there are a lot of fundamentals of learning that we've really learned in the last decade or so that allow you to learn better in less time. I think that is the goal. The goal is not to wear a badge of honor and say, I studied so many more hours than you. In fact, the badge of the honor is opposite. It's I didn't study at all, or I studied as little as I could, and I still did as well as I needed to. And so these are some of the basics. For example, learning takes time. Don't procrastinate means that you should learn every week as the weeks are going. You have 10 weeks to learn all this material. You shouldn't be revisiting week 1 material at week 10. You should have learned week 1 material at week 1, revisited it at week 2, revisited it at week 4, revisited it at week 10. It's spaced. And the more times you go back to it, the more time you put up front, the better and stronger your learning is. So if you think about it, like, let's say I only had 100 hours to study for a class. If I put all 100 hours during finals week, I'm going to do much worse than if I space out that 100 hours. It's the same amount of time. Arguably, you could probably space out 70 hours and still do as well as studying 100 hours in that last week. And there you go. You've saved 30 hours, which you can use for the rest of your life, the life outside of being just a pre-med. Next is brain dump and summarizing things in your own words. So yeah, learning has to be like a very active process. Obviously, you're not rereading textbooks or just highlighting for highlighting's sake now. Practice problems really engage your mind, force you to move information around and get questions right. Flashcards, also a very evidence-based technique. Feynman technique, also evidence-based technique. All right, so the point that I really want to make is that the fundamentals work. A lot of people want to find the super secret Anki deck or do this, like, I don't know, Pomodoro variants that always works, like Anime Doro or something like that, where you are watching 5 minutes of anime and then doing 25 minutes work, and then 5 minutes of anime, 25 minutes work. Or they're going to eat a superfood like kiwis because it's shown, or they're going to take a pill that's like a nootropic and layer it on with focusing medications, and now their brain is fully unlocked. The point I'm trying to make is that the basics work and the fundamentals work in everything. From learning to, I don't know, losing weight to building muscle. I mean, I'll talk about losing weight. Like, I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight because I'm dealing with this herniated back. And if you were to tell me what the basics were for weight loss, you would probably say, track your calories, walk, weigh yourself every day. And lo and behold, when even me, who I've had many successful weight gain, weight loss journeys, I used to really take lifting very seriously in college and medical school. Even me, who I would consider myself like an intermediate kind of weightlifter, I would start to ignore the basics. And over those 4 to 6 weeks where I've been trying to lose weight from 170 to, I don't know, 165, I have not lost any weight. And then I was like, okay, let's just go back to basics. I had to remove the ego, and I had to start weighing myself every day, walking 10,000 steps, tracking my calories. I've done that over the last 4 weeks, and you wouldn't guess it, I've started to lose weight. So do the simple things, swallow your ego if you have to. The fundamentals are critical. Everything from making friends. There are fundamentals from like looking them straight in the eye, using their name, remembering what you guys last talked about, asking more questions than talking. The fundamentals always work, from building relationships to sleeping to exercising to studying and earning a 4.0. All right, let's move on to the next TikTok, which is about pre-med coursework.
Please do not base your decision on whether or not to be a doctor or to apply to med school based on how much you enjoy or do well in your pre-med coursework, right? The pre-med coursework does not give you any sense of what it's like to be a doctor. These are basically hurdles that you need to pass in order to get to the next level, right? Yeah, you need to take classes and you need to be able to do well on your MCAT. And you need to be able to learn, right? You need to be able to study, you need to be able to retain information, you need to be able to learn. But those are the things it's selecting for. It's not a class load that's teaching you how to be a doctor. So you shouldn't say, oh, I didn't like organic chemistry, therefore I shouldn't become a doctor. right? These are hurdles you need to show that you can pass in order to get to the next level. But you should base your decision on whether or not to be a doctor based on whether you think it's interesting being a doctor. Please do not base your
Yeah, I think this is a great piece of advice. There are so many steps along the way, and I'll outline them quickly. You graduate high school, you go to college, you do your prerequisite courses, you take the MCAT, you apply to medical school, then you start medical school. And that's when you're learning actual medical science, from physiology to pathophysiology to anatomy to histology. But during the entire pre-med journey, you're doing a lot of things that don't end up being relevant to your life as a doctor. I'm a doctor today. I'm an anesthesiology resident at Mount Sinai, and arguably you would say that you probably need to know some physics and some OChem and Gen Chem because you're working with drugs all these days. And isn't organic chemistry like for pharmaceuticals and all this stuff? Yes, I do know a lot about the drugs that we use, but none of it has to do anything to do with SN2 reactions or stoichiometry. Those things are no longer relevant. It's not entropy and delta E, delta H. We don't do those things anymore, and they're not relevant. So why in the world are you spending so much time in your pre-med years doing that stuff? Well, I agree with him. It's more that it's a hurdle to screen out people who aren't willing to do the work of learning some difficult subjects. I learned biology in the past. I learned Gen Chem and OChem in the past. I no longer know some of those things. However, I did demonstrate an ability to sit down, focus, learn the material, get tested on it, do well on it again and again and again. I did that for the MCAT. I did that for clinical experiences, the willingness to send hundreds of emails just to get my first shadowing experience. Everything along the way of getting into medical school are these kind of barriers, and it tests whether you have the wherewithal and the agency and the ability to solve problems and get over the hurdle, get what you need done, move on to the next thing. I think a nice corollary for this is sometimes people will tell me, I don't think I want to be a doctor. I've done hospital volunteering for 500 hours. I just absolutely hate it. And I say, I agree. I also hate hospital volunteering, but I love being a doctor. And the reason I can say that is that hospital volunteering does not demonstrate or does not show you what it's like being a doctor. And so if your clinical experiences are restocking drawers and sitting at the front desk and acting as a receptionist, kind of signing patients in and transferring phone calls, and you realize you didn't like that, what you learned is that you don't like being a receptionist. What you learned is that you don't like restocking drawers. You did not learn whether or not you want to be a doctor. And so this is where I do think like having shadowing experiences, getting a real understanding of what Dr. Andrews, who I think is a neurosurgeon, or myself, an anesthesiologist, or an internal medicine hospitalist, or an outpatient doctor, getting a wide breadth of understanding of the different types and contexts of medicine is really, really important. Because I can also say, I love being a doctor, but I would never love being a neurosurgeon because I understand his job much more now. I can say I love being an anesthesiologist, but I can also say I would never want to be a psychiatrist. There are so many different fields of medicine, and I'm not telling you to hone in on just one, but in the midst of all the specialties, there are these central underlying fundamentals and threads and themes that you can always pull on to understand whether you'd like this job. For example, we all communicate and we all work in teams. If you don't really like that aspect, you probably won't like medicine. For example, we all really support and serve patients in our own way. Radiologists do it different from pathologists, do it different from anesthesiologists and neurosurgeons. At the core of it, though, there's this desire to meet someone who is ill, take care of their problem, and perhaps follow them over time. Some of those things are just core to medicine and being a doctor. And so be very careful with the conclusions you come to. Make sure that they come from the appropriate inputs. And if you don't like pre-med coursework, you've just proven to yourself you just don't like pre-med coursework. But you can still get an A, you can still get past it if you do want to become a doctor. All right, let's move on to our last TikTok.
If she respond to this DM, boy, you fucked up. She took your
Follow
pictures off her gram.
You realize you're cooked out of this world. I picked this one because I found that the comment section was really interesting. Got into med school at a 3.3 and a 504. Anything is possible. Yes. It's the hours that get me, because what do you mean 500 plus shadowing, 1,000 volunteering, 700 research, 2,000 MA hours? I don't think I've been alive for that many hours. Yeah. So I'll speak to this one first. I will say that you have to be careful. Just because someone got into med school with a 3.3 and 504, which happens every single year, it does not mean that you will get into med school with a 3.3 and 504. I'm going to look up the stats here. You can look it up yourself on table A-23. You can Google that. But the stats say, here I have kind of an older table from 2023. There's a 2025 version. But someone with a 3.3 and a 504 has a 26.2% acceptance rate. So again, 1 in 4 of them will get in somewhere. But again, doesn't mean that means that 3 in 4 got in nowhere. So when you read comments like these, you have to be careful, right? Conversely, if you have a 4.0 and a 528, it's also possible you don't get in anywhere. There are 1 in 6 with people with near perfect stats that don't get in anywhere. Statistics apply to populations. They do not apply to individuals. What is more important to understand is what your actual chances are. And it's partially based on your grades, like your GPA and your MCAT, but it's also very important to analyze the rest of your application, your extracurriculars, your strength of your letter of recommendations, your school list and where you want to apply to, and then ultimately your actual written application, your personal statement, your secondaries, and your interviews. Every one of those pieces of the application are critical for raising your chances of getting into medical school or lowering your chances of getting into medical school. And so what I found helpful is to use actual validated benchmarks, like real applications that got into real places. When you're reading on Reddit, there's not a lot of context. There's a bunch of hours, maybe there's some grades, but they don't tell you all the schools they apply to. They don't show you the strength of their extracurriculars, because you can have 2 people do 500 hours of being an EMT, but one is an EMT supervisor who's managed multiple boroughs in New York, who has trained multiple people, and is also part of like an EMT liaison with the New York State to try and get EMTs more rights. The other can be 500 hours to get the EMT license, and then they never went on a single ambulance shift, right? So there's a lot of variance, and you can come to very dangerous conclusions if all you're looking at is hours, grades, and results. You come to very, very dangerous conclusions if all you're looking at is just a 3.3 and a 504 and 1 singular acceptance. Who knows where he got in? Who knows the context of all of this? And so I take all of those things with a grain of salt. The long and short of it is you are not cooked. And if you really do want to know if you are cooked, talk to someone who actually has some experience in medical school admissions to give you a sense of where you actually stand. Look at real applications so you know what good looks like, what it takes to actually get into your dream programs. We have 8 full AMCAS applications that earn acceptances to some of the best programs in the country. Over 23,500 premeds are in our community and use resources just like that one every single day. Always free. Click the Premed bundle link in our description box below now. But wherever you are in your pre-med journey, there is always room to improve the things that you need to. Your stats can be fixed. Your MCAT can be fixed. You can reinvent your extracurriculars. You can earn stronger letter of recommendations. You can change your school list pretty easily. And you can write, I believe everyone can write a fantastic application to medical school. All of those individual 6 levers are adjustable with time. So no matter where you are, even if you have 0.0 GPA and a 0 on the MCAT with 0 extracurriculars, 0 letters of recommendations, 0 school lists, and 0 personal statements, all that means is you're basically a freshman day 1. That's exactly where we all started. And that's exactly where we all came from to get into some of the best medical schools in the country. So you can do it too. All right, that's all the TikToks we got today. If this was fun or informative, we got many more TikToks to go through. That video is here somewhere. I'll put it up. Talk to you soon. Goodbye.